Hello there, my name is Michael Cassidy, and I did my research over the rise of the podcast in the digital age. Let's get started. So radio has been a juggernaut in the field of audio-based media for over 50 years now. Arguably, no other form of media has had as much success, longevity, and reach as radio. But times are changing, and competition for share of ear is stronger than ever now. But of all this competition, podcasting could be the greatest. Put simply, podcasting is changing the landscape of digital media, and this is thanks to its convenient use of RSS feeds, its huge library of content, and a steady rise in listenership. RSS feeds stands for Really Simple Syndication and allows for podcasts to be easily distributed and accessible. RSS feeds allows users to submit their work to podcast download and streaming sites like iTunes and Google Play. How this works is that when a podcaster finishes their work, they post their content to an RSS feed through a .xml file, which basically looks like a bunch of code. Once the content is published through an RSS feed, it is distributed to podcast sites. One asset that has helped podcasts become the broadcasting giant it is its great variety of content. Basically, if you can think of a type of podcast you'd want to listen to, it's probably out there. The most popular genres are solo, where one podcaster talks into a mic, interview, where the host of a podcast interviews a guest, multi-host, where two hosts share a show, and video, in which the podcaster records an accompanying video to the audio. Podcasters often trade off as guests, which helps spread the reach and potential audience of both podcasts. Put simply, podcasts are making money. Because podcasts are highly suited to individual tastes, target marketing is fairly simple. There are a lot of ways a podcaster can monetize their podcasts, but sponsorships are the simplest and most common. A sponsorship is basically a live read of a podcast ad during the broadcast. Affiliates are pretty common too. They're second to sponsorships. Podcasters will endorse products they believe in, generally. The advantage of this is that once a listener starts to respect the opinion of the podcaster, they will likely be interested in buying their endorsed products. Those two are the big ones, but other methods include product resale, donation, coaching services, etc. Another way a podcaster can make money is by releasing premium content, which includes exclusive episodes and backlogged episodes. Podcasts have become much more popular since their debut in the early 2000s. This is largely due to the increase in smartphones and the ability to listen to podcasts in cars through advanced center console technology. But the rise in listenership has been steady as opposed to rapid. Podcasting has seen a positive growth in listeners every year for the last 10 years. And some interesting statistics I found were that Americans that have listened to a podcast in the past month has doubled since 2008, and overall podcast awareness has doubled since 2006. The library of podcasts continues to grow as well. There's been a large increase in actively hosted podcasts and downloads over the last 3 years especially. Roughly 12,000 individual podcasts existed in 2012. There were 16,000 in 2013 and 22,000 in 2014. Mobile devices are the preferred method of listening to podcasts, and in 2012, 1.6 billion downloads were through mobile devices. This number rose every year, and in 2014 hit the impressive mark of 2.6 billion. As far as the demographics for podcasts go, they are large and unspecific. Podcast consumption doesn't favor a gender, as both 50% of men and women make up podcast consumption. 25 to 34-year-olds consume the most podcasts, making up for 20% of overall podcast consumption, and according to Edison Research, podcast consumers are generally highly educated, and 31% of people who listen to podcasts on a regular basis have a graduate degree or higher. Social media has played a pivotal role in putting podcasts at the forefront of broadcast media, and podcast consumers tend to be very active on social media. In order for a podcast to be successful, they must utilize social media to its fullest potential, usually. Some people I've seen do this very well are Marc Maron, NPR, and The Ringer Sports Show. As far as share of ear goes, Americans spend roughly 4 hours a day consuming audio. Of this time, podcast listeners reported spending 30% of that time listening to podcast, which ranks higher than radio, XM, stream music, and own music. In conclusion, podcast continues to rise in popularity, and frankly, it isn't showing any signs of slowing down. I can only assume younger generations will continue to consume podcasts as content will continue to expand and cater to their interest. And while podcasting faces a lot of competition for the share of ear, I think it should be able to hold its place in the forefront of audio media consumption.